Hi, and welcome to the lecture for the structure of the heart and blood flow through the heart. We'll go ahead and get started. To begin with, you need to know about the location. The heart is located relatively centrally in the thoracic cavity. It does set just a little bit to the left. It's not perfectly center. If you look at your mid-sternal line here, it rests right upon the diaphragm. This is a sheet of muscle that divides the thoracic and abdominal cavities. Now down here would be your liver, and your esophagus would be running down here to your stomach, and spleen and pancreas under your stomach. So your abdominal organs would all be down here. And of course, sitting right beside your heart in the thoracic cavity are your lungs. It does have some coverings. You take a look real quickly here. These coverings, or the sac around the heart, are called the pericardial sac. There is a parietal pericardium, which is a layer that surrounds the heart, doesn't actually touch it. And then there's the visceral pericardium that actually touches the heart. So in between those two layers, the visceral on top of the heart and the parietal is a serous fluid, kind of the fluid around the heart. If we take a look at the layers of the heart, or the makeup, if you were to cut through the heart as a cross section, you pull out a little chunk or a piece here. You see quickly the epicardium is also called the visceral pericardium. Then you have this middle layer, the myocardium. You may have heard of a myocardial infarction or a heart attack, where blood vessels get clogged up that deliver the oxygen and nutrients to this muscle. The cells therefore die because they can't get the proper amounts of oxygen, and that's what causes a heart attack, and that part of your heart will be dead. Heart cells do not regenerate through mitosis. And on the inside layer, the endocardium, this would be where the blood is inside the chambers of the heart, the atriums and the ventricles. As a quick note, the blood does not nourish the heart muscle directly. Like all parts and cells in your body, oxygen and nutrients are carried through blood vessels, through arteries, veins, and capillary beds to all of your cells. So there's no nutritional benefit of having blood in, say, this ventricle here. Like, for instance, glucose is going to leave the ventricle and go directly into the cells through diffusion. It's still carried through the blood system or through the blood vessels. Looking at the external anatomy of the heart, you see these little flaps here. You have a right and left side are called auricles. Down here would be your ventricles. The main thing you want to focus on here is for blood flow through the heart is the blood vessels. You have the superior and the inferior vena cava, which enter the right atrium. Coming out of your right ventricle here, you have the pulmonary arteries. One of these, this guy here, is going to go to the lungs. This one's going to go to your other lung, so they split and go left and right. Quick note, this is the only blue-colored or high CO2, low oxygen artery in your body. In a general rule, we'll say arteries are red and veins are blue, and that fits right down here. This is an artery. It's highly oxygenated, red blood. This is a vein, low oxygen. Therefore, you get the more bluish color. This is an artery, though. So a better rule for arteries and veins is arteries go away from the heart, and veins, like the vena cavas here, go to the heart. So keep that rule in mind. So you come back from the lungs and you enter into the left side of the heart, into your left atrium through your pulmonary veins. Notice these are red veins. Once again, a flip-flop. The only red veins in the body. High oxygen, low CO2. The highest oxygen, actually, in these veins. Then you go from the left atrium to the left ventricle, and then you go out the aorta, which carries blood to the rest of the body. So we'll be tracing that here in just a second. This is your external anatomy of your heart. Just as a general rule, any of these red guys here we're going to call coronary arteries, and any of the blue ones we'll call cardiac veins. The ligamentum arteriosum is simply a ligament that holds the aorta. Internal anatomy, and this is good for learning blood flow through the heart. You see our chambers. You have the right atrium and the left atrium, which receive blood. The right atrium receives blood from the body, from the superior and inferior vena cava. So all the blood vessels ultimately from the lower part of your body dump into the inferior vena cava. All the blood vessels, from your arms, from your head, all eventually dump into the superior vena cava. That blood is dumped into the right atrium. Also, the right atrium receives blood directly from the heart itself. Those cardiac veins ultimately dump into the right atrium through the back side of the heart, of the coronary sinus. If we take a look here on the left side, you see the pulmonary veins entering the left atrium. And the ventricles down here are our discharging chambers. And these chambers are all separated by valves. And valves, their job is to prevent blood from flowing the wrong direction. So blood's going to enter into the right atrium, flow directly into the right ventricle. And when this ventricle contracts, it's going to pump blood out the pulmonary arteries to the lungs and not backwards back into this atrium. That's the job of this valve here, this tricuspid valve. You see these three little papillary muscles here, these three strings here. Now, these muscles help keep the valve in place, and they're held to the valve by these chordae tendineae, also called the heart strings, the job here. And blood's going to flow out this valve, which is your pulmonary valve, out the pulmonary arteries to the lungs. The dividing wall of the heart is called the septum. Separates our chambers so that the deoxygenated blood from the body does not mix with the oxygenated blood that's going to the body. So this side, the right side of your heart, is pumping blood to your lungs. It's called the pulmonary circuit. The left side will be pumping blood out this aorta to the rest of the body. It's called the systemic circuit. So on this side, blood coming back from the lungs enters the left atrium, travels through another valve, the bicuspid or mitral valve. You can use either name here. You see it has two cusps, or papillary muscles holding your chordae tendineae. Then blood is pumped out this aortic valve, out the aorta, and carried to the rest of the body. The aorta makes it turn and runs right down your backbone, basically, and branching off. Later you'll have arteries go into your stomach and your kidneys and your spleen and all the various parts, of your body. So trace blood flow real quickly here. Using this. You can say blood from the upper part of the body comes through the superior vena cava, blood from the lower part through the inferior vena cava. Both dump into the right atrium, which contracts and pumps blood into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. The blood from the right ventricle flows through the pulmonary valve, out the pulmonary arteries to the lungs, where oxygen is picked up and CO2 is dumped. Blood returns through pulmonary veins to the left atrium and travels through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, then out the aortic valve, then out the aorta into the rest of the body. Here's a flow chart of that. The systemic circuit remembers the body. This is blood that is low in oxygen, high in CO2 coming back from your body. And you'd have to add in superior and inferior vena cava here, right atrium, tricuspid, right ventricle, pulmonary valve, pulmonary arteries to the lungs, pick up the oxygen, dump the CO2, back through pulmonary veins to the left side of the heart, left atrium, mitral or bicuspid valve, left ventricle, aortic valve, aorta to the body again. It's a good little flow chart here. Follow the same image here. The vena cava, superior and inferior, right atrium, tricuspid, right ventricle, pulmonary valves, pulmonary arteries to the lungs. This is where you're going to change from blue to red. You're grabbing the oxygen, hemoglobin, on your red blood cells and dumping the CO2. Back through pulmonary veins, left atrium, bicuspid valve or mitral valve, left ventricle, aortic valve, out the aorta to the rest of the body. In the body, your cells are going to consume that oxygen and dump in the CO2. This ties back into cellular respiration. This is a cellular mechanism. All cells in your body do this. Down here, in your legs, your muscle cells are going to use oxygen to make ATP, and CO2 is going to be a byproduct of that chemical process in cell respiration. So that's why you're using the oxygen dumping the CO2. Looking at our next slide, this is just a good view of how valves operate. So you can see when these valves close, the blood is prevented from going backwards the wrong direction. This forces blood out the pulmonary artery here and out the aortic artery here. So it's keeping blood going the right direction. Same thing on your semilunar valves. Gravity would tend to pull blood back down into your right ventricle here. It's prevented from doing that by your pulmonary valve. Same thing on your aortic valve over here, preventing that blood flow. There's one note I forgot to mention. If you look back at your other image, the full image of the heart, the cutaway kind of like this, you notice the muscle wall the myocardium of the right side is very thin compared to the left side. Now, the right side of your heart just has to pump blood to your lungs, and they are located right beside the heart. Whereas the left side of your heart has to pump blood up the aorta and up those carotid arteries against gravity to your brain. So the left side of your heart has a much thicker myocardial layer compared to the right side of your heart. If you go back and look at the image in full color, you'll see that the right side is far thinner than the left side. As far as conduction systems go, the heart has its own internal conduction system. It's called the nodal system. You see here in the right atrium, the sinoatrial node sends out a signal to the right and left atrium to contract. There's a short delay, about 0.1 seconds, and then it hits the AV, or atrioventricular node, travels down the septum. It's going to travel ultimately down through this AV bundle, sometimes called the bundle of His, then breaks out into bundle branches, and then finally into these tiny things, these little Purkinje fibers. So this is what causes the ventricles to contract. Now this heart rate, about 75 beats per minute, is set by the pacemaker. Your nervous system can reset this. You know, you can get fight or flight response. Hormones can reset this. If I were to come around and inject you with epinephrine or something like that, then your heart rate would speed up. A person goes to sniff some kind of speed or cocaine or something like that, then their heart rate speeds up. Over-the-counter drugs can mess with this as well. There were some diet pills not too long ago that were causing people's heart rates to speed up too fast. So chemicals and electrical impulses can reset it, but the daily, lub-dub heartbeat is set by the sinoatrial node. If it's dysfunctional, then your heart rate is much slower. The AV node could hold it at about 50 beats a minute. Purkinje fibers can hold it in the 30s. But so a lot of times you see the pacemaker sort of quit working, and you've heard of it being replaced. People have an artificial one put in when it becomes dysfunctional. And that's the brilliance of medicine.